Shane Van Gisbergen just did something at Phoenix that left the entire NASCAR garage stunned. The Cup Series rolled into the Straight Talk Wireless 500, and for SVG, it was an absolute disaster. He spun out, not once, twice. 2 full spins during the race. His car was battered, damaged, barely holding together. Most drivers would have parked it. Most guys would have called it a day and started thinking about next week. But Shane Van Gisbergen is not most drivers. He dragged that beaten-up Trackhouse Chevrolet through the field and somehow, some way, finished 11th. But here's the thing. What he pulled off at Phoenix isn't surprising at all. Not if you know where this guy comes from. Not if you understand what built him. Because Shane Van Gisbergen wasn't made in NASCAR. He was forged in something far more brutal. A series on the other side of the world where chaos isn't the exception, it's the standard. Where cars make contact every single lap. Where one mountain in Australia has ended more careers and created more legends than any track in America. Phoenix? That was just another Tuesday for him. And to understand why SVG is now sitting 5th in the Cup Series standings, ahead of Joey Logano, ahead of Kyle Larson, ahead of Denny Hamlin, you need to go back to the beginning. You need to understand the series that shaped him, the races that broke other drivers but made him stronger, and the mountain that taught him one simple lesson: never, ever give up. Let's break down exactly what happened at Phoenix, because when you see the full picture, you'll understand why this result was so impressive. The Straight Talk Wireless 500 is not an easy race. Phoenix Raceway is a 1-mile oval with some of the tightest racing in the Cup Series. The corners are flat. The margins are razor-thin. One small mistake and you're in the wall. Or worse, you're spinning into traffic. And for Shane Van Gisbergen, the mistakes came early. The first spin happened when he got caught up in a pack of cars fighting for position. Contact, loss of control, full rotation. Just like that, his car was damaged and he was falling through the field. Most drivers would have been frustrated. Most guys would have let that moment get into their head. But SVG kept pushing. Then it happened again, a second spin, more damage, more positions lost. At this point, his Trackhouse Chevrolet was beaten up badly. The car was not handling the way it should. The aerodynamics were compromised. The tires were fighting against him. Everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. And here's where it gets interesting. Instead of backing off, instead of riding around and just collecting a finish, Shane Van Gisbergen went to work. He started picking off cars one by one. He found grip where there shouldn't have been grip. He made passes that had no business working. Slowly, methodically, he climbed back through the field. By the time the checkered flag dropped, that destroyed, twice-spun, barely holding together Chevrolet crossed the line in 11th place. 11th. After all of that. That's not luck. That's not circumstance. That's something else entirely. That's a driver who has been through worse. A driver who has seen chaos before and knows exactly how to survive it. And to understand how he developed that skill, we need to leave NASCAR for a minute. We need to go back to where it all started. A young kid from New Zealand who fell in love with racing and ended up in the most violent, unpredictable touring car series on the planet. Shane Van Gisbergen was born in Auckland, New Zealand in 1989. And from the very beginning, racing was in his blood. His father, Robert Van Gisbergen, was a racer himself. He competed in touring cars and GT racing in New Zealand. So Shane didn't just stumble into motorsport. He was born into it. He grew up in garages. He grew up around engines, tire smoke, and the sound of cars pushing to their limits. While other kids were playing video games, Shane was learning the craft from his dad. He started karting as a young teenager, and it didn't take long for people to notice. This kid was fast, really fast. But more importantly, he was aggressive. He wasn't afraid to race hard. He wasn't afraid to fight for position. And he definitely wasn't afraid to take risks. By the time he was 17 years old, Shane Van Gisbergen made a decision that would change his life forever. He packed up and moved to Australia to pursue a career in the Supercars Championship. Think about that for a second. A teenager from New Zealand, leaving everything behind to chase a dream in one of the toughest racing series in the world, and the Supercars Championship. It's not like anything else in motorsport. These are 650 horsepower V8 sedans racing door-to-door on street circuits and road courses. Contact is constant. Aggression is expected. If you can't handle cars banging into you lap after lap, you won't survive. It's touring car racing at its most brutal. And the competition? Some of the best tin-top racers on the planet. Shane didn't ease into this series. He was thrown into the deep end. And at first it wasn't easy. He made his Supercars debut in 2007 as an 18-year-old, driving for Team Kiwi Racing. It was a small, underfunded New Zealand-based team. They didn't have the resources of the big Australian squads. They didn't have the best equipment. But what they did have was a young driver with raw talent and an unbreakable will to compete. The results weren't immediate. Shane had to learn. He made mistakes. He crashed. He struggled. But he never stopped pushing. He never stopped learning. And slowly, year by year, he started to figure it out. By 2012, he had moved to Stone Brothers Racing. By 2013, he was winning races. And by 2016, something clicked. Shane van Gisbergen wasn't just competing anymore. He was dominating. That year, he moved to 888 Race Engineering, the most successful team in Supercars history. And in his very first season with them, he won the championship, his first Supercars title. The kid from New Zealand who showed up at 17 with nothing but raw talent had just beaten the best drivers in Australia. But he wasn't done, not even close. Once Shane van Gisbergen figured out how to win in Supercars, he became almost impossible to beat. That 2016 championship wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was the beginning of a dynasty. Let me give you some numbers. Over his Supercars career, Shane van Gisbergen won 3 championships: 2016, 2021, 2022. 3 titles in one of the most competitive touring car series on the planet. And he didn't just win those championships by small margins. In 2021 and 2022, he was utterly dominant. He won races that other drivers didn't even think were winnable. He made passes that looked physically impossible. He pushed his car to limits that made engineers nervous. By the time he left for NASCAR, Shane van Gisbergen had accumulated over 80 career wins in Supercars. 80. That's not a typo. 80 victories against the best tin-top racers in the world. But here's what the numbers don't tell you. They don't tell you how he won those races. Shane van Gisbergen became famous for one thing above all else: his ability to extract performance when it mattered most. Final laps, closing stages, moments when most drivers tighten up and play it safe. That's when SVG came alive. He had this uncanny ability to find speed that wasn't there 5 laps earlier, to push harder when everyone else was managing their tyres, to take risks that other drivers wouldn't dream of taking. And he did it over and over again. The Supercars paddock started calling him the Giz, and when the Giz was behind you in the closing laps, you knew trouble was coming. It didn't matter if you had a faster car. It didn't matter if you'd led the whole race. If Shane van Gisbergen was within striking distance, you were never safe. He became a master of late race battles, a driver who thrived under pressure, a competitor who got faster as the race got harder. But there was one place that elevated his legend above everything else. One event that tested every single skill he had developed. One mountain that separates the good drivers from the great ones. Mount Panorama, Bathurst, the greatest touring car race in the world. And what Shane van Gisbergen did at Bathurst is the reason he's so dangerous in NASCAR today. If you want to understand Shane van Gisbergen, you need to understand Bathurst. Mount Panorama is a 6.2-kilometre circuit carved into a mountain in New South Wales, Australia. It's not just a racetrack, it's a monument, a proving ground, a place where legends are made and careers are destroyed in the same corner. The Bathurst 1000 is the crown jewel of Australian motorsport, a 1,000-kilometre endurance race around one of the most dangerous circuits ever built. Concrete walls line the track. Elevation changes are massive. The mountain section is narrow, unforgiving, and absolutely terrifying at full speed. One mistake and you're in the wall, or worse, you're tumbling down the mountain. Every year, the best drivers in Supercars show up at Bathurst knowing one thing: this race will break you if you let it. The pressure is immense, the stakes are enormous, and the chaos, it's guaranteed. Rain can roll in without warning. Crashes happen constantly. Safety cars bunch up the field and throw strategies into the trash. The Bathurst 1000 is 6 hours of pure survival. And at the end, only one team stands on top. Shane van Gisbergen didn't just survive Bathurst, he conquered it. He won the Bathurst 1000 4 times. 4. Let that sink in. In a race where so much can go wrong, where luck plays a massive role, where the best drivers in the world struggle to win even once, Shane van Gisbergen did it 4 times. 2020 was special. He and co-driver Garth Tander took the victory in a race filled with drama. 2021 was another win. 2022 made it 3 in a row, a feat that almost never happens at Bathurst. And 2023, his final Bathurst as a full-time Supercars driver, he won that one too. A 4-peat. Absolute dominance. But it wasn't just the wins that defined him at Bathurst. It was how he won. Every single one of those victories involved adversity, setbacks, moments where the race looked lost. In 2020, the team had to overcome mechanical issues and strategic chaos. In 2021, the final stint was an all-out battle. In 2022, the pressure of chasing a 3-peat was immense. And in 2023, knowing it was his last Bathurst in Supercars, he delivered when it mattered most. Bathurst taught Shane van Gisbergen something that you can't learn anywhere else. It taught him that races are never over, that chaos is just an opportunity, that no matter how badly things are going, you keep pushing, you keep fighting, you keep your head down and you drive. Because at Bathurst, the driver who panics loses, the driver who gives up finishes nowhere, but the driver who stays calm, who adapts, who keeps believing even when everything falls apart, that's the driver who wins. That mentality didn't stay in Australia. Shane van Gisbergen brought it with him to NASCAR, and it's exactly why a race like Phoenix doesn't shake him. 2 spins. He's seen worse at Bathurst. Damaged car. He's won Bathurst with problems far bigger than that. Chaos everywhere. That's just Sunday at Mount Panorama. The mountain forged him, and now NASCAR is finding out what that really means. So what makes Shane van Gisbergen different? What separates him from drivers who have similar talent but never reach the same heights? It's not just skill. Plenty of drivers are fast. Plenty of drivers can wheel a race car. But not every driver can handle adversity the way SVG does. His mentality is his superpower. Think about what we've already covered. A teenager who left New Zealand at 17 to chase a dream in a foreign country. A young driver who struggled in underfunded equipment for years before getting his break. A competitor who spent over a decade battling the best tin-top racers in the world. A Bathurst legend who won 4 times by refusing to quit when things went wrong. Every single step of his career taught him the same lesson. The race is never over until the checkered flag drops. That's not just a motivational quote for Shane van Gisbergen. It's a way of life. It's how he approaches every single lap. Most drivers have a breaking point. A moment where they mentally check out. A moment where the damage is too bad, the deficit is too large, the situation is too hopeless. SVG doesn't seem to have that breaking point. When things go wrong, something switches on inside him. He gets calmer, more focused, more precise. While other drivers are pounding the steering wheel in frustration, Shane is already thinking about the next corner, the next opportunity, the next position he can gain. His engineers in Supercars talked about this. They said working with Shane was different because he never gave up on a race. Even when the data said they were done. Even when the math didn't make sense. He would push until the very last lap, and more often than not, he would find something that nobody else could. That mentality comes from experience. It comes from years of racing in a series where anything can happen. It comes from Bathurst, where 6-hour races flip completely in the final 30 minutes. It comes from battling door-to-door with drivers who would put you in the wall without hesitation. Shane van Gisbergen learned that motorsport rewards the driver who keeps fighting, not the fastest driver, not the driver with the best equipment, the driver who refuses to quit. And here's the thing about that mentality, it translates. It doesn't matter if you're racing supercars in Australia or stock cars in America. It doesn't matter if the track is a street circuit in Adelaide or an oval in Phoenix. The fundamentals are the same. Stay calm, stay focused, keep pushing, never give up. That's what Shane van Gisbergen brought to NASCAR. Not just his talent, not just his racecraft, his mentality, his unbreakable belief that every race is winnable if you refuse to stop fighting. And NASCAR is starting to realize just how dangerous that makes him. If you want another video about SVG and NASCAR, check out this next one from More Than Speed.